And I think I can hear someone's mic's open. Okay. All right. Welcome to the Doing the Right Thing Spring Ethics Session. I'm happy to see everyone here, and I am thankful to have Libby Simmons and Kim Porter with me this morning. Kim Porter is the person who is going to be helping me moving forward since Libby's retiring. So I'm thankful to have both of them with me this morning. Jerry, your camera's on. I'm not sure if you know that or not. I don't want to catch you unaware. So um, we are going to go ahead and get started. And um, just a reminder for the ASHA financial disclosure, I'm employed by the Department of Ed. This is for ASHA CUs. And anyone who couldn't make it this morning can also watch the recording. As far as the learner outcomes for this morning, we want you to be able to locate and describe ASHA's Code of Ethics and the WVD Code of Conduct Policy 5902. And we want you to be able to apply the principles of ethics to working in our schools and address some of the common ethical dilemmas identified by colleagues using the five-step ethical decision-making model. One thing I want to mention is that we had, I think it was, excuse me, I forgot to mention I have allergies right now, so I'm going to have to be taking drinks of water periodically. I'm sorry about that. Um, we had, I think it was like seven or eight, or, it could have been even up to nine dilemmas that were turned in this time. And as you guys know, typically we get through about three. I have four ready for today, but the ones that I selected were ones that I thought could apply to the largest population. If you turned in ethical dilemmas for some unique situations that probably won't happen in other counties, and your dilemma isn't targeted today, if you need a response or an answer for that dilemma, please just contact me and we can discuss it outside of this training. ATHA ASHA released a new code of ethics in 2023, and it's available, of course, online. And the principle of ethics rule in is that individuals with evidence that code of ethics may have been violated have the responsibility to either work collaboratively to solve the situation where possible, or to inform the Board of Ethics through its established procedures. And that's the link to the procedures that tell how to file a code of conduct violation report. Um, in Lissa Power Defer, who designed the five-step process that we're going to be using. Those of you who heard her at Wavisha know that this is the process that she used there too. Um, she says, remember, not doing anything is indeed a decision. It's a decision to leave things as is. Those are two important things to remember. And one of the things that we'll be doing today, as far as the code of ethics, is trying to figure out how to work collaboratively to solve some of these issues. Everything is not an immediate report to ASHA for a code of conduct violation. The Department of Ed also has policy 5902, and that's the employee code of conduct. And the part that's important and applies to everyone is that we recognize the capabilities and conduct of all school employees greatly affects the quality of education. And the board further believes that all school employees should be intrinsically motivated by the importance of the job that they do. The purpose of the employee code of conduct is to establish appropriate standards of conduct. The regulations also require that West Virginia public school employees respond immediately and consistently to incidents of bullying, harassment, intimidation, substance abuse, and/or violence, or any other code of conduct violation that impacts negatively on students in a manner that effectively addresses incidents, deters future incidents, and affirms respect for individuals. Um, There are other pieces that are important, which include contribute, cooperate, and participate in creating an environment in which all employees and students are accepted and are provided the opportunity to achieve at the highest levels. Immediately intervene in any code of conduct violation that has a negative impact on students in a manner that preserves confidentiality and the dignity of each student, and comply with all federal and West Virginia laws, policy, regulations, and procedures. Okay, so our approach today as we go through these dilemmas is we'll discuss the dilemma first, and then we'll take an initial vote on solving the dilemma, trying to decide whether it's a legal, ethical, or moral dilemma, because some of these are actually just moral issues as far as it making you feel uncomfortable. And we'll determine that together. And then we'll go through Lissa Power Defer's five-step decision-making process and then discuss some possible solutions. I always love this part about the solutions because you guys come up with some really good suggestions. And I know that's going to happen today. Ethical decision-making five-step process. For step one, you gather data to understand what happened. Make sure you know everything about the situation because until you've done that, you really don't know that the situation you think you're aware of is really what's happening. It's really important to make sure that you do that. Step two is to identify whether it's a moral, ethical, or legal dilemma. And step three says to consult resources. And you're going to review policies and procedures, guidance documents, technical assistance available in your state or through ASHA, and reach out to knowledgeable or thoughtful individuals. Everybody kind of has their own advisory board that they contact whenever they have questions. And those resources are very valuable when it comes to trying to make a determination about some of these situations. And then you're going to brainstorm solutions. Once you've gathered all the information, you've consulted resources, then you're going to brainstorm some solutions. And with this, you're going to consider every option because sometimes some of the most at first seemingly outlandish solutions may turn out to be your best viable option. So don't discount anything when you're brainstorming. Just anything that pops into your head, be sure and include that in your decision making process. And then step five is to select one or more of the solutions. Because remember, for some of these situations, there may be more than one solution. So that's the final step. So as we go through these dilemmas, we're going to be doing those considerations. All right, dilemma one is we have hours and hours of paperwork to complete each week. It seems to me that
Yes.
I'm sure everyone could have said yes to that one. Um, it seems that to me that therapy is what takes the back burner. Everything has to look good on paper and has to be done correctly. However, to get the paperwork completed, we have to either miss seeing children during the week and or double the size of our groups so that we have time to get the paperwork done. So our first step is to gather information. We can't assume that we have it all. Um, we don't have, there are a lot of things that we don't know that are included in that dilemma. Watch for your personal predisposition or bias. And with this, in this case, that could be really difficult and challenging at times because if you too feel as if you're overwhelmed with paperwork, and I honestly don't know anybody who doesn't feel that way, then, watching out to make sure that you're looking at the whole situation objectively and trying to come through with some solutions is going to be important. Look for all perspectives, and without all the information, you can misunderstand the situation. So, as far as gathering data, this is some of this, these are some of the things that I think we should have information on, like what types of scheduling model, what type of scheduling model is being used. If they're using 3 to 1, then there's some built-in time for paperwork. What paperwork is causing the issues? Can electronic versions of the paperwork be used? Why is canceling therapy or having double groups the only way to complete the paperwork? And then what else has been tried? Is there anything else that we need to consider as we're looking at this situation? If you could put your suggestions in the chat box, I'd appreciate it. Caseload size. That's a great one. How many schools? Exactly. If you're traveling to different schools, then that makes a difference. Weighted caseload. A consistent paperwork process from the board office. Other duties, great. Other responsibilities within the school that are being assigned. See, this is why I love this session because you guys always come up with such great responses. Um, that's okay, Sarah. We knew what you meant. So those are all great things that we need to know. Paraprofessionals help with paperwork. What may be allowed? Those are all really good things. Unlimited preschool hours, great. Does the SLP have a system in place that allows for paperwork to be done more efficiently? Perfect. These are all really, really great suggestions about more information that needs to be gathered. Um, so now let's try to decide if this is a legal birth to 3 evaluation deadlines. That's great. Yes. And sometimes we know that we don't always get as much advance notice as we'd like about those. So that does make a difference. So Libby or Kim is going to put in the chat box the link for this um, first dilemma to decide whether it is a moral, um, legal, or ethical situation that we're looking for. And just remember, you just have to click on the one you want to vote for and click on the thumbs up, and that gives you your vote. So far, it looks like people feel like it's more of an ethical issue, but it is a legal issue as well. It's starting to get more votes. Um, and then just a couple people think it might be a moral issue. And really, if you think about the code of conduct, policy 5902 with the Board of Ed, essentially they're going to consider everything kind of a moral issue because we should be intrinsically motivated to do everything possible to do the best job. So, are there step kids being counted? That's good. That's another one of the options. So it looks like ethical has won this vote, and now we're going to discuss it a little bit further. If you're thinking that it's a legal issue, you can refer to IDEA, examine state guidance, review Medicaid regulations. Um, if you're doing anything with Medicaid, these are just, um, sources for you to review. Examine state licensure or credentialing requirements, and review confidentiality requirements for HIPAA, FERPA, those kinds of things. So for step 3, you can research policy 2419. You can check out the 3-to-1 compliance model for scheduling. And for those of you who don't know, um, the 3-to-1 model means that you see students 3 weeks for direct therapy, and then 1 week you have indirect services. And that gives you time in your month to do paperwork and that kind of thing. For some counties are using it and using it very effectively, and they see the special ed directors have seen what a good system that can be. For some counties, it's difficult for them to look at the schedule and say that you're going to have a week that you're not directly seeing students, even though that can really turn out to be your busiest week. So what some counties have done is use a 4-to-1 model essentially. So you see students 4 days out of the week, and then 1 day of the week you have for paperwork and that kind of thing. So, there are some options as far as different service delivery models. It doesn't have to be 2 half-hour sessions weekly for everybody and pull out. And then research to see if there are some electronic paperwork options. I know, several counties are using eDocs through Rhea Dyer's Best Life Company, and that's wonderful. We have tried to get an electronic documentation system here. And once all the bugs are out of Weavis 2.0, we'll try that again. But there are even other options as far as maybe, having your own system that's on the computer that you can, pull up and do. You can also think about other options, and we're gonna do that in just a second. So as far as step 3 is concerned, you're going to consult your resources. So that's consult individuals, consult with organization representatives, seek wise advice. Don't assume that you're accurately interpreting the policies, laws, and regulations. And it's helpful to have your personal advisory board. So now Kim is going to put in the chat box the brainstorming. So you're going to come up with some solutions that you think might be helpful for this person. So all you're going to do is click on a plus sign and then start typing. Mm. While you guys are doing that, we all know that the students' IEPs need to be met. Um, so that's one thing that we do know. And we do know that, there are times that things need to be sent home or documentation needs to be done. Um, and just trying to come up with the best way to approach that is what we need to do. So it says request help with therapy while you complete paperwork. Consult with the lead SLP and or the special ed director regarding implementing 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. Do paperwork while the student is present in the classroom, like doing your data and Medicaid. Online documentation, eSchool Docs has been very helpful. I hear that from everyone. At first, sometimes I think it's intimidating to do it on the computer, but once everybody becomes used to it, they say it's really invaluable. 4-to-1 sounds like a strong solution. Assess, schedule, and consider doing more inclusion therapy to provide therapy to a larger group. These are all really good solutions, you guys. Bulk your planning together 1 day per week to accomplish the most possible rather than just doing tiny bits here and there. And I totally see that one. I know there are some counties that dictate that people have a 40-minute planning period a day. That's all you can do, and the rest of the time you have to have back-to-back therapy. That does not allow you to have much time to do anything else. And if you can't string some minutes together, it's hard to get anything complete. Um, Ask about an SLPA, discuss problem with the principal, negotiate duties. That's a really good one. You know, just having a good discussion, especially if you have a good relationship with your principal, is a really good solution because sometimes they just don't realize they're thinking about getting those duties covered and they don't realize all the extra things you have to do. And sometimes having the ability to do the duty at the beginning of the day or end of the day can make a difference. Set up your schedule to have block time on Fridays for paperwork and meetings. That's what I used to do, and it really was helpful. Use Teams and Zoom to meet with students at other schools when possible. That's something that COVID taught us, and that's a really good solution. Just remember that there needs to be an adult present with that student to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do on that other end. Make a statewide stakeholders group to share resources that may save time. And we could definitely think about doing that. That's a really good idea. Try entering documentation while student is doing a self-check for errors, progress at the end of the session. I love that one. These are all excellent. You can set up larger groups that are still very effective, such as co-teaching in the autism room and a couple times a month. I used to do that, and honestly, I saw more progress from doing that than I did pulling students every day of the week. Set specific days for meetings, try to have documentation system that allows it to be done quickly, like label sheets for data transferred to the sheet. I know that one of my coworkers used to do that, and that was such a great option. She just had her sheets of stickers, and every time after she collected her data, she'd just pull off the sticker and stick it in her log book on that day's section. Try to have documentation system that allows it to be done quickly. Oh, that's label one. I'm sorry. Prep notes ahead of time so you can easily plug in the data. That's a really good solution too. When you have short breaks during the day, and then Medicaid paperwork ready behind each data sheet to be done right after each session instead of having to do them in bulk. Those are all really good solutions, and have templates for notes, reports for all paperwork to help complete faster. You guys are awesome. These are all really, really good solutions. And so I'm hoping that whoever turned in this dilemma is really getting some good ideas here because you guys really helped out and gave them some good ones. Um, so now we're going to, you would select one or more of the options um, from all the ones that we had. And, um, any of those or a combination of those would have really been helpful. But I think one thing to remember too is I've received calls in the past where a special ed director was saying that a therapist was not seeing a certain student and the parent had called to complain. And when I talked to the therapist, she said, well, it seemed like every time it was time for that student, she had a note that needed to go home or something like that. And just I think trying to be judicious about what's going on. And, if you have a student that you're missing all the time and you have to get a note done, then definitely try to do your note when you have another student. And hopefully writing the notes or doing, I'm not sure what kind of documentation because it really wasn't listed. It was listed just as paperwork, and paperwork, of course, includes a lot of information. But trying to make sure that if you do have to do a large group here or there, or you have to cancel a session, that you kind of spread that out so it's not affecting the same group or student all the time. Thank you guys for all those wonderful suggestions. So when we first looked at that, let me go back to this one just a second. When we first looked at this dilemma, I'm sure a lot of you were thinking, you're right. We have so much paperwork. It's impossible to get it all done. It's overwhelming. So sometimes I'm sure it's easy to just shut down. Um, because I know that happens here. It gets really overwhelming here sometimes. And, just trying to take one thing at a time, because that's really all you can do. Um, is, usually helpful. But I'm hoping that after we looked at everything and thought about all the information we didn't have, and then thought about all the possible solutions, you could see that maybe it's not as much the paperwork as our view of how to handle it. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. So, another thing I would do is I would probably talk to a friend who I knew was good with paperwork and ask them what kind of system they had. I loved the idea of the shareholders group, and we'll see what we can do about thinking about doing something like that, because I think that would be extremely helpful for everyone. All right, so for dilemma two, it says, I have inherited students from a previous SLP in my county. As far as I understand, this SLP was to be using the same documentation system that I'm using. At the start of the school year, I noticed that these students did not have therapy logs for the previous school year. When I asked for the SLP about it, I was told they prefer to keep paper documentation and that they would send me the therapy notes for each student I requested. I never received the notes, and I feel as if they probably didn't exist. So we're going to go through our 5-step process again. We're going to figure out what data we need to gather. We're going to identify it as a moral, legal, or ethical dilemma. We're going to consult resources, brainstorm some solutions, and then select one or more solution. So for this one, I started off by saying one of the simplest things you could do to gather the data is request the therapy logs again. Sometimes you may have just run into each other, you know, at a meeting or something and requested the logs. In requesting them in writing in an email gives that reminder. So that's the first suggestion. I'd like for you to put your suggestions in the chat box. And Jennifer, I see your information about how you joined. No worries. Don't worry about that. So just put some suggestions in the chat box about what information we need to gather to make sure that we have all the information possible before moving forward with this situation. Okay, it says, can you repeat, show the dilemma again? Of course. Check to see if there was a hard copy of logs sent to the special ed office, um, and or special ed office for the previous school year. Are they filed? Can you look yourself, request the logs again, and CC the administrator, do a quick short assessment to see where they are with their current goals. These are all good suggestions about information to gather. Check student attendance for that time frame. These are all good suggestions. Can use progress reports to see where they are with their goals. Look at the progress report notes in the IEP. Make sure the lead SLP and special ed director know about this. And I think that's really good, but I would definitely, all these are really good. I would definitely request the logs first before I, you know, referred anything further, just because you want to give them the benefit of the doubt in case they forgot. Um, we all get, sidetracked sometimes. But then if you request it again, don't receive them, absolutely make sure that your director and your lead SLP know. and then progress reports where I would start. So you at least know where to start with your students. That's good. Those are all good solutions, all good pieces of information to gather. Okay, so we're going to go through the 5-step process, and we are going, let's see, I guess it must, oh, I forgot I went backwards to show the dilemma again. I apologize. So Kim's going to put the link for this one in the chat box for us, and you're going to decide whether it's a legal, moral, or ethical issue. I really appreciate your all's participation in these sessions, because these sessions wouldn't work without you. And I think it also helps you guys start thinking this way. I know sometimes when I receive calls from um, SLPs about situations, we actually go through this process together. And, sometimes they realize that they really didn't have all the information. And, sometimes we realize they do, and something needs to be done. So um, it's really helpful when you guys use this, participate. It looks like most people think it's an ethical issue. Um, and we do have votes for legal and moral. And, some of these situations can be all three. They absolutely can be all three. And we're going to look at that in just a second, as soon as we've given everybody a chance to vote. As we move through, I think with this one, you're going to see that this is one of the ones that is can apply to all three. Okay. So to determine whether it's a legal issue, I just looked up some information in policy. Um, there's no, I couldn't find a direct comment that said that, we're responsible for documentation, but everything that we do is based on the documentation. Your your progress notes, how are you going to measure progress if you don't have documentation of all the therapy sessions to know how they've done? All of your goals are supposed to be measurable. And how are you going to know whether or not, those goals are being met unless you have documentation? Um, so it says as a part of reevaluation, the IEP team and other qualified professionals, as appropriate, must review existing evaluation data on the student, including the student's progress toward meeting the annual goals. How can you do that if you haven't kept documentation? It also says the IEP must include a statement describing how the student's progress toward IEP goals will be measured. What do you put on your goals? Do you put therapist logs? If you do, then that documentation has to be done in order to meet that IEP goal. Um, IDEA says that a child's IEP must include measurable annual goals that relate to meeting the child's needs that result from the child's disability to enable the child to be involved in and progress in the general curriculum. Um, and that information, unless there's no reason to have measurable goals unless you're going to be keeping data to show that progress. Um, and we're going to talk about that in a second because as we have been doing some county visits, I've been noticing some things about the therapy goals and the documentation. It says what should be included in therapy notes. This is from ASHA. The standard for therapy notes in schools is no different from any other setting. Most important notes should document service provided and student performance. So the types of documentation and their status as records include treatment notes or progress notes. 504 accommodation plans are considered school records. And since it's considered a school record, that means that according to FERPA, the parent has a right to request them. Um, and that is exactly what they can do. So that all makes it not only legal, but we're also going to look at ethical in just a second. In legal too, I see Rita put this comment on there. If you don't document it, it doesn't exist. And your records could be requested and used in court if there's ever a due process filed. And the due process doesn't necessarily even have to be filed against speech. But if you have no therapy logs, your county will automatically lose. So these are just all important things to remember when you think about whether or not you're responsible for keeping documentation. Ethical. Is it an ethical issue? According to the Code of Ethics, individuals shall maintain timely records, shall accurately record and bill for services. So here again, we've kind of shown it's a legal issue. Now it's an ethical issue, and it's a moral issue. You know, we have to do what feels right. Um, and if your gut tells you that something isn't right, then that kind of lets you know that, you know, that's a moral issue you need to think about. And um, this this issue, if you do not have documentation, um, really is a legal, moral, and ethical issue. So to consult resources, you could research Policy 2419, ASH's Code of Ethics, and IDEA. I went ahead and did that ahead of time just because I thought it was important. What other resources do you think you could contact? That's going to be in the, you can put your suggestions for that in the chat box. County policies, great, Paula. Part of job description for the county. And remember too, if you're billing Medicaid, you have to have those therapy logs. The legislature mandated that everyone who can bill for Medicaid. So it's part of your job to do that. How long should we keep paper records of therapy data logs? You know, Christy, that's a really good question. And it's listed in that article for ASHA. Usually what we've been saying is 7 years. You know, I've heard some people say 3 years because if someone files a due process, they can request back to 3 years for that um, because they can only request like one reevaluation period. Um, just to be safe, you know, you could always scan them too and keep electronic records as long as you want. But the paper copies are it is listed in the ASHA article, and I'll make sure and get that to you. I'll post the response. And Chris says, I think the sticky part of the situation isn't us keeping documentation, but what if you suspect a colleague isn't keeping documentation? That feels like an ethical conundrum. And you're right. That's the reason we're discussing it, Chris. But I think one of the reasons that we're talking about whether it's a moral, either ethical or legal issue is because we're trying to prove the importance of it and trying to say that you can't, it's not really good as far as trying to collaborate on a response if you just automatically assume without gathering data that the person isn't. Without having proof, and then you report them to the special ed director. Um, what we're trying to do here, I think, is trying to be fair, trying to give them an opportunity and give them the benefit of the doubt. And then, because it is of such importance, then if they do not have it, then yes, we should at least say something to the lead SLP and the special ed director to make sure that they're aware. I've had special ed directors call and say that they found out at the end of a school year that a therapist hadn't kept documentation all year, and they wanted to know what they could do about their Medicaid billing. And of course, the response was, you can't do anything. You can't go back and make those records up. So, um, letting them be aware of situations like that when they're occurring, um, is definitely something that, I think is an ethical decision to do. Um, and Lisa, I will look up that information in ASHA for you. The article that I'm referring to is listed in the PowerPoint, and it will be posted. And if you ask three different people how long you have to keep records, you're probably going to get three different answers. You said you've heard it's 5. Um, with this, I felt like going with ASHA was a good bet. So we'll make sure you get that, and then we will go ahead and go on. So let's brainstorm some solutions. Kim, if you'll put this link in the chat box, we'll talk about some solutions for this issue. Hmm. Hannah says this might be a silly question, and I'm new to this, so people may know this answer. But are there certain guidelines what should be included in all data logs? Like, are there certain elements that must be there? Yes, Hannah, there are. And we did a sample therapy log, and I can make sure to send that to you. And what we did was base it on a SOAP note because that's what Medicaid requires. What we suggest in our guidance is that you use the same logs for everyone. But, some people have chosen not to do that if, not to use those more extensive logs if the student isn't Medicaid eligible. The only issue with that is if they become Medicaid eligible along the way, then you won't be able to use any of you'll have to change your sheets at that time. But yeah, you have to have all the pieces of a SOAP note included, including, the plan and the objectives, how they did, their progress and all that kind of thing. Do we have a standard daily log form recommended by the state? Yes, we do, Andrea. And that log is, it was posted on the Medicaid website, but I will um, post it in this Teams group and email it to you guys. It's not a mandatory log. It's an optional log because I know that SLPs like to create their own logs in a lot of ways, what you're used to doing, but it needs to include all that information. Um, so I see a couple of solutions up here, and some people looks like somebody voted on someone else's solution. Um, we have two forms of that therapy log. It is one has drop down um, options that you can select, and one does not, because some people just wanted to print off the paper copy and do it from there. Um, so have a team meeting to review paperwork and policy with entire team so everyone's on the same page. This should include special ed director, and have your county use eDocs. It just provides more consistency for everyone. And I kind of suspect that that might be what they were using when they said they were all supposed to use the same format. And maybe somebody just didn't feel comfortable with it. I'm not sure. But anyway, these are all good solutions. And so then we would have to do that. Carol, the Best Life eDoc therapy forms are available through um, the there's a cost for having access to eDocs, and so some counties have chosen to do that um, for their county. Um, so there is a cost for that. That's not something we can share with everyone, but we can share our document. Okay, so those were all good, really good solutions. And as far as selecting one or more options, I think you could, select all those that were just put on there. But you could also, and there was one on there that said contact someone who's good with paperwork to see, how to set up. But that person was supposed to be using what everybody else was using. And that's another thing you could check. Just because you assume that that's what was said, maybe it wasn't. Maybe they just said, here's an option to use. And finding out for sure that that's the case is also another thing you could do before you work collaboratively with the person. One thing that I would suggest, and it might be kind of hard to do, but I think it'll help work out the situation in the long run, is before you report the person to the special ed director and the lead SLP, is maybe just telling them, look, I feel like ethically I need to let them know that you're not doing your documentation. Um, if you've given them the opportunity to provide it again and there's still nothing, that might be something you consider. So those were all really good solutions. All right, our last dilemma, it looks like, we'll see how long it takes us to get through this one, because I imagine there are going to be some questions about this one. It says a teacher stops the SLP in the hallway and asks, can you screen Johnny when you get a chance? I've noticed he has some sound errors when he talks. The SLP doesn't want to dismiss the teacher's concerns and pulls Johnny out of his least restrictive environment to complete the screening without parent permission. The SLP never evaluates a student without parent permission received first, but the SLP has screened students without parent permission first. So, let me give you a second to read that one. And this is the question. Should the SLP have screened Johnny without receiving parent permission? Should the SLP have pulled Johnny from his LRE? So we're going to go through the 5-step process again. And these are just some of the suggestions of data to gather. Um, what grade is the student in? Screening information from policy 2419, including child find. What was the screener that the SLP used? Did the SLP screen the student earlier and put a recheck on them? If the student failed the screening, what did the SLP do with the information? And put your suggestions in the chat box. I see Ashley said only if Johnny is in pre-K or kindergarten, otherwise you need parent permission. Jamie says screening notification posted in newspaper at the start of each school year. Yes, you're right. And that is posted, but think about the grades that's posted for. So it's usually posted for specific grades and new enterers. So we don't know what grade Johnny's in. As Jamie said, if he's in preschool or, no, it's actually, sorry, preschool or kindergarten, be all right. Somebody says only if he's a first-time West Virginia student. Can I see the dilemma again? Sure. All right. Okay. So, um, did the teacher go through the school's SAT team first? If concerns with speech, then SLP should be included in the SAT meeting. These are all really good things to look look at and to get information to gather. And Jody says to find out if it's affecting education. And it doesn't only have to affect, I mean, and remember that the education could also be not only academics, but social and vocational. So that's all good information that we need to know. Um, so now, as far as data gather, I did look at policy 2419, and this is what it says about the screening process. All students entering kindergarten or preschool have not passed a relevant screening, and all students entering West Virginia public and private schools for the first time. Um, you have to do, developmental screenings for children under compulsory attendance age, and at least 10 calendar days prior to initiation of screening activities, it has to be a public notice that the screening is going to take place, and give the parents the option to opt out of that to participate. So everybody said if they're, kindergarten, preschool, or new to the state, that would be one thing because that notice has been in the paper. But if they're not in that grade, then trying to decide what to do about it is going to be a little bit different. So identify if this is a moral, legal, or ethical issue. Kim's going to put one more um, idea boards link in. It looks like the majority of the people are voting that it's a legal issue. And Lisa says, I would think that if the students in first grade, for example, it was marked as a recheck when they were in kindergarten, that no parent permission would be required to do a recheck. If they were placed on a recheck, do we need permission? Um, those are really good points. And if when you did your screening, you told the parent you're going to recheck them in first grade, second grade, whenever you told them, then that's part of that original screening umbrella they were under, and you don't have to have parent permission to do that. Um, but always make sure that the parent realizes that you did notice something, you think they're going to self-correct, but you're going to recheck in the future just to be sure. So at least that way the parent knows there's an issue. What we're trying to make sure doesn't happen here is we're trying to protect the SLP, because what happens if one of the parent volunteers in the school who happens to be there that day is the parent's best friend, and she goes home. I mean, she sees the SLP with that student out in the hall and then calls her friend and says, "Oh, I didn't know Johnny went to speech." Um, then that could cause an issue for the SLP. And we also always have to respect the rights of the students. So it looks like the majority of people have said here that it's a legal issue. And the question here, I mean, there are some questions too that say, can parent permission be obtained by phone? Yes. If the parent was present at SAT meeting where concerns and screening was discussed, is a signed permission necessary? I know there are some counties that do that. They'll ask us, just sometimes as a matter of course, they'll ask the SLP to go ahead and screen a student who's discussed at SAT. That's a county policy that your special ed director has approved of. So whatever protocol they have set up is what you should follow. What I'm doing is just giving you a general guidance response that could happen with any county. Um, and Chelsea asked, if you screen them in GEE, does this eliminate the problem? We're going to talk about that. So looks like we've decided this is a legal issue. So let's see where we need to go next. Consult resources. What resources besides policy would you guys think we should consult? You can put those suggestions in your chat box. Other county SLPs. Okay. County policies and procedures. Great. Okay, well, let's move on. And now we're going to think about some solutions. I will say that um, like I said, if it went through the SAT, the parent was there, um, you could even make sure that it's in the SAT notes and that, parent agreed, that the screening could happen. It doesn't have to be, because the screening is not evaluation, but the issue is how you're going to use that screening. Do you take the information from that screening and then start a referral? If you do, then you're going to use some of that screening information as a part of your evaluation process. And so that really, to cover you and the student, should be approved by the parent. But if they were part of the SAT and that's been documented, you should be fine. Um, so let's go ahead. Kim has posted the link. Let's go ahead and put some of your solutions in here. Mm. And in some cases, there are just some really simple solutions. Somebody was on the right track a while ago about the GEE environment. Do a classroom observation. See students' steps for a trial period. Remember, with steps, you need parent permission to do that. That's our guidance. Screen them in GEE or just call the parent before you do anything. These are all good solutions. Bev says she gives her SAT coordinator the permission to screen forms, and if at SAT meeting they request screening, the parent signs the form. That's a great solution, Bev. Have parent write a letter to request or give permission to screen. Call parent before doing anything to see if they have concerns. These are all really good solutions, you guys. And they protect not only you, but the student. Have the teacher describe the errors to see if they're appropriate and call the parent. Very nice job, you guys. Um, and so if we wanted to select one of we could select several of these solutions. I think one of the things I would do is have the teacher tell me what their concerns are and then go in the classroom and just observe. You're not screening, you're listening for the sounds or observing to see if they're having language issues. Usually, if they're having language issues, those are going to be affect them academically, so they're going to be discussed at SAT. So all the suggestions about the SAT, going through that are appropriate. The biggest thing is making the parent aware that the screening is going to happen, and you know, after going in and observing, if you see something that you're concerned about, you can call the parent and tell them that the teacher had mentioned she'd noticed something. Ask if the parents noticed it, and is it okay if you just talk to them for, a few minutes and do a quick screening with them? But you guys know that you don't have to do a formal screening to be able to tell if it's something that you know, that there might be the need to check for. And just explain to the parent that as far as child fund's concerned, it's our responsibility to find students who may need our services. So just making sure the parent is aware that that's happening is the biggest thing. Lynn says if a student's not new, as in an oversight, and there's no screening document in the system, is that still considered a new screening and no need for permission? If the student isn't new and they weren't screened, then I would do the same thing, Lynn. Honestly, if they're not in preschool or kindergarten and weren't involved, or a new enterer and weren't involved in that screening notice that went out, then I would go in, listen to them, see if there is something you're concerned about, and if there is, contact the parent and ask for permission before. just to protect you and the student. And I know, sometimes it's a pain, but sometimes that quick phone call can save you a lot of trouble later on down the road. So those are some of the solutions that we would have selected. We're not going to have time to get to dilemma 4, and I'm sorry about that. I went ahead and stuck it in just in case. As I said before, if your dilemma wasn't discussed and you want a response, please contact me. Thank you for everyone who turned in these dilemmas. I think you guys can see that all the ones that we chose are ones that probably everyone will run into. And, I hope this has provided a little bit of clarity for you as far as, whether it's an ethical issue or a legal or a moral. In a lot of cases, it can be all of them. But so many times when we think something isn't happening that should, we think, oh, it's an ethical issue. We need to contact ASHA. And in a lot of cases, it could be, something that's a legal issue as well. And remember that what ASHA's Code of Ethics says is to work on a collaboration first, if possible, to take care of the situation. Here is a reminder that the links in the chat box are for the live presentation. Kim's already put it in there. And then the QR codes are for the recorded version. The deadline for turning in the live presentation survey response is May 1st at 11:30 p.m. The link's in the chat box. Kim just put it in again. Um, please check your responses and make sure that your email addresses are correct. I had to look a couple of them up this time again just because of extra periods and that kind of thing that, I know they're typos, you didn't mean to do it, but we want to make sure that you get your certificate. So please double check them before you submit them. And that way, Kim and Libby won't have to spend time looking them up. And here is the QR code for the people who are viewing the recording only. And the deadline for viewing the recording is going to be May 15th. And I think that is it. Thank you guys so much for your participation this morning. Like I said, these sessions won't work without you turning in your situations and also for participating during the session. And you guys come up with some really great solutions. And as you face some of these dilemmas, I'm serious. If you go through this process, it really does help. So, you can pull this out sometime you think you have a dilemma, go through those 5 steps and see if it helps. And if not, you can always reach out to. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Libby and Kim, thank you so much for the support. Can't do it without you guys either. And we will talk to you guys soon. Take care.